Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of This Week in Crypto Philanthropy, where we highlight the top giving news, stories, and the power of crypto for good. Nick Mikalewski, Senior Sales Manager here at the Giving Block, and as always, joined by my colleague Pietro Moran. Pietro, how's it going?
It's going all right, Nick. It's good to be back. I think we're back into the normal flow of things. I think I said before the show even started, we're like back to our roots. We have a more conventional episode today, but also a very exciting content calendar. So back to the normal schedule for a little bit, and then maybe pivot right back to the fun stuff. So yeah, it's going to be a great week.
Yeah, let's jump right in terms of what we're going to be talking about. But as everybody takes a look at what's on the short agenda, fear not, we've got a lot of great guests that are in the lineup, especially over the next month or so. So TBD, but hang with us today. We've got some good updates to share, especially on the donation front. But before we get to that, Pietro, how are markets looking today?
Yeah, I mean, since we've done one of these episodes where we really kind of jump into the sort of weekly update news prices, crypto's kind of cooled off in a little, sense. Not majorly, nothing like too extreme. One end of the spectrum to the other. What you'll notice, I mean, Bitcoin's at 96,000. I mean, still an extremely elevated price relative to the last 2 years. It doesn't really give me any cause for concern, but I think all that to say, we're just seeing a little bit of the markets being in a wait and see, I would say, kind of position relative to there's been a new president in the last 30 days. There is a lot of this sort of wait and see. Let's see how the economy is going to unfurl, how everything's going to play out before we maybe go a little bit further out in the risk curve. All that to say, though, we've seen like still elevated levels of interest, exuberance, and excitement for crypto assets across the board. It's just that the prices aren't, going up 20, 30% a week as we are sometimes used to when it's a bull market. But I would say, other than that, we've seen a lot of great stuff in the sort of non-volatile crypto asset landscape. Stable coins, TVL, which just means like the total number of stable coins in circulation, keeps kind of trickling up, which means more and more people are using US dollar backed stable coins as a form of payment, or other things. But nothing too crazy to report on the price front for some of the tokens we're watching.
Yeah, and for folks who, maybe haven't listened to some of our other episodes where we kind of go into a little bit more on the market side, it's kind of interesting on the nonprofit side or the giving side of the house. There's some interesting kind of psychology that happens, and not too much surprisingly, like when things are like really like ramping up, sometimes you see giving like speed kind of dip a little bit because people are waiting to see like, hey, how high is this going to go? Maybe I don't want to give yet. Maybe there's a higher price coming. So you could sometimes see giving sort of like pull back a little bit, and then we're in these like consolidation time frames. You sometimes see the opposite. You sometimes see giving actually kind of happening. People thinking, all right, you know what, this might just kind of be where things are going to stay for a bit. We're not going to reach that next level. Maybe I'll go in and lock in some gains, make my donations now. So, really, really kind of interesting. But what we've seen from the past week, though, has been really, really strong. And I want to say here, we've had a couple of, some pretty sizable gifts here. So about 3 million in crypto donations over the past 7 days, which is super strong. And it continues to be led by Bitcoin, just like all of last year, not unsurprisingly. But, Ethereum came on really strong as well, as you can see some of the figures there. And of course, just like you said, we touched on just a minute ago, stables continue to be, a pretty strong showing. So, Bitcoin, Ethereum, USDC, those are the three assets that we lead with in our giving forms for a reason. So yeah, it seemed to be following some of the usual trends. But even if we strip out the really big gifts, taking a look at those crypto major gifts so far for this month, hovering around that $8,000 mark, which 8 to 10K, it's kind of like the average crypto gift size. So even if you pull out some of those really transformational gifts, pretty strong. And I think many nonprofits out there would love to have an average gift size around that number. The average cash gift is something between like $100 and $200. So for nonprofits that are looking for ways to grow that major gifts program, I mean, 2025 off to a really great start. And the blue chip charities have been starting 2025 really strong. But as we say often, this isn't just for the really big guys as well. I mean, some really small organizations have been off to a great start, and wanted to highlight just one of many examples I could have pulled from. But just taking a look at some of the numbers, we've got an organization sub $500,000 in total operating budget. So grassroots, small organization, and so far in the first 50 days, $60,000 in crypto gifts from a variety of supporters. And as we say again, it's not about timing the market, right? So we talked about some of the, sort of pricing trends and where things are, right? It's not about timing the market. It's just about time in the market. And $25,000 of that 60 grand that they've already seen has come inside a single week. So it's just, again, making that door available for donors, all throughout. But yeah, Pietro, any kind of, thoughts on some of the stats we're seeing?
I mean, when you talk about major gifts, or rather average gift sizes being in that $8,000 to $10,000 sweet spot, I mean, that to me just seems, like, I think to anyone it's a lot of money, but it's incredible to see that this is kind of, for a non-cash asset like crypto to be in that sweet spot early in the year, right? We're not talking about some of the tax advantage, maybe, bigger chunks of change getting donated at the end of the year. Seeing that momentum is really cool from, maybe my slightly outsider's position. 3 million in a week, also really strong for the month of February, in the month of February when we're not talking about similar giving season stuff. I mean, pretty epic. And then, the last point you made about time in the market, and also just reiterating the point, like, it's all about maximizing your touch points with donors and making sure that you're making yourself available or getting shots on goal, or just time in front of folks for them to cultivate that relationship with you as a nonprofit. Kind of reminded me of a quote I just heard about, I think it was Steve Martin, the comedian. It's like he spent, whatever it was, 11 or 17 years of his early life playing in clubs, and like just incrementally getting better and better and better until he had a full set that he actually ends up using on talk shows, and, in the sort of like massively popular part of his career. And it kind of just reminds me, like, like crawl, walk, run kind of standpoint. It's like he spent, 10 years as an amateur, 5 years being kind of good, and then 3 years being incredible and exceptional, is kind of like how it breaks down. And I'll butcher the quote, right? So this is all just kind of my memory serving me, but kind of feels the same way with some of our nonprofits that you talk about, who maybe started with us, 6 months or a year ago, and they just kind of built brick by brick up to this point where now they're seeing, these $25,000 in a week for an org that's only doing 500,000 a year. I mean, that's on pace to double their annual operating budget just from crypto donations, obviously assuming that performance. But what an incredible story. It's awesome to see these come in week after week.
Yeah, and I guess as a quick aside, a little bit of a plug, we released our 2025 annual report. So if folks are listening to this, we'll make sure to put a link in the show notes. We go through all kinds of what we think the growth drivers of 25 are going to be, and as a quick, like, kind of recap. I mean, 2024 was, our one of our best years on record. We think 25 could be even bigger, and we also outlined some of the key hurdles to to kind of keep in mind. Make sure that your nonprofit isn't falling into some gift conversion pitfalls. So again, if you're a nonprofit that has a kind of a complicated donor journey into how people can make those gifts, I mean, reduce those clicks as much as possible. We go through a number of steps there. And if you're, again, trying to wonder, how can I improve the conversion rate on these non-cash gifts, uh, try to not throw up that, call this number, send this email. Making it easier to give and removing that friction is what's helping an organization like the small organization reach those donors and lubricate that level of generosity. So we'll put a link in the show notes. We'll take a look at the 2025 annual report. It's great. There's a lot of great fundraising stats. And I guess with all the news that we're sharing in that annual report, the crypto industry itself, hasn't been standing still, at all. A lot of momentum in the crypto space, and Pitch, I'm sure it was hard to, pick just a few stories to highlight. There seems, crypto moves fast anyway, but I think 2025 has been off to a blistering start, even for crypto.
And it's especially hard when we have great episodes where we talk about things like the annual report or have guests on that we're talking to. And by the way, I haven't been able to be on all of those episodes. You did a fantastic job, just kind of working the narrative around one, the annual report, and just the treasure trove of data that's in there. It's always a helpful resource. And, I find myself digging through some of it and just seeing facts that I wouldn't have anticipated. But then also the nonprofit highlights are obviously, I think, the core of the value proposition of the show. It's like you can't do any better storytelling than just hearing it from folks that are actually out there, working with donors and receiving these donations. All that to say, having a couple episodes between like the last crypto news update that we've done has made it particularly difficult of like picking the coolest and most exciting stories. But I will try, or I tried my best this week. We got 4 bullet points to walk through and highlight. Number one, your point about enthusiasm from the institutional investor class, as well as folks that maybe don't seem like crypto investors on the face of it. It remains to be true. So, top highlight I have here is the state of Wisconsin investment board reported $321 million of Bitcoin ETF shares as part of their portfolio. Again, this is one of the most conservative types of institutional investor that's out there, right? We're talking about the pension funds and folks that really have an obligation to make sure they're not taking excess risk because they have obligations to the folks who they have to pay out over time. They have doubled down on Bitcoin. They say this is, a piece, not the whole pie, but a piece of their portfolio, and they're right sizing their allocation, which just meant that they doubled it, I guess, since the last time we reported about it. But yeah, I think that's part of the narrative and the commentary we've been talking about, which is that some folks are really leaning in. Maybe they took a starter position, they wanted to learn, and now they're saying, okay, we feel comfortable. We've seen some of the performance data. We're just continuing to dive deeper and reinvest in success, right? Because Bitcoin has performed exceptionally well over the last year. Putting a bow on that, I just want to talk about something for more of our crypto native folks and folks who've been following sort of the news cycle within the United States. A couple of years ago, Binance US, which is a subsidiary of Binance, the crypto exchange, just resumed and reopened for business, so to speak, in the United States with USD deposits. What does that really mean behind the hood, right? Because on its face, that's cool. Another market participant, another super well-known name in the crypto industry, back open for business in the largest market in the world, which is the United States. But if we read between the lines, what does that tell me? And I'd love to get your take on this too, Nick. It tells me from the banking, the infrastructure, the compliance side, stuff that I see a lot on the Shift4 crypto side of our business, working with folks that need to be, really tightly buttoned up and very, kind of above board and white shoe in terms of their offering in the regulated markets that we have here. For them to achieve that milestone is no small news to me because it shows a very different tack in terms of regulators, banks, how they're perceiving the crypto industry and saying, okay, we're willing to open you up back for business. This was not the case 12, 18 months ago. I mean, I would love to hear your take on this, Nick, but it seems simple, but actually means a lot more behind when you dig in.
Yeah, I mean, just a continued acceleration of the phrase like crypto isn't going anywhere. It's here to stay. It's going to become ingrained in more everyday Americans, financial mix, whether that's through the investment side, payments, transactions. I mean, so no, it's a very encouraging sign, and yeah, not. I expect that we'll see, more of an openness for a lot of players in the space. So it's encouraging to see how quickly this has happened. It's been a real U-turn, so to speak, and for the organizations that are curious about the space, just know that really a lot more avenues to reach supporters. And so I think this opens up the industry, and for the nonprofits engaging with supporters, even more ways to connect with the community. So it's fantastic.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I'll make one last point here because a lot of our nonprofit partners are US registered 501(c)(3)s. What does this tell me, at least, or give me hope for? It says that as we onshore more of the crypto industry, because there's regulatory clarity, because there's a path towards success, because there is an appetite for letting entrepreneurs build their businesses here in the United States, at least for our US centered nonprofit partners, this says to me like, CSR partners for the longer term, right? Like, how are you going to engage crypto corporates, not just individuals, for a more long term sustainable relationship? Obviously, this is step one. They have to be able to open for business to, create a relationship with their end customers. But what a great way to sort of prime the pump for future opportunities for our partner network. I think that's something that we won't be reporting on it again next week, but, really lays the groundwork for stuff like that, which could create cool activations and cool giving campaigns over time. So that's something I want to keep, in the back of our minds, just as we sort of look towards the future and try to think of what the trends will be. But yeah, again, super exciting. Taking it one step further, next bullet point I want to highlight here: U.S. has a crypto, sorry, the United States has a crypto task force under President Trump, and love him or hate him, as far as crypto is concerned, a lot of folks in government and at regulatory agencies are taking another kind of renewed approach to crypto regulation, enforcement, and just making sure that it is properly regulated for the U.S. market. So there's a U.S. crypto task force that is actually evaluating whether or not the United States will adopt what's called a Bitcoin strategic reserve. So, for folks who maybe aren't familiar with the concept or haven't just kept on top of the news cycle because it's been so fast, the rough idea and just the overview here is that in the same way that the United States owns a bunch of gold, if you've ever heard of Fort Knox, right? We technically have like 5,000 tons of gold, which is part of sort of the balance sheet of the United States. It's something that we own as an asset that we think is valuable because historically gold has had a ton of value and has meant a lot in global markets for currencies and other things. People are playing around with the idea and exploring whether it's feasible to do the same thing with Bitcoin. So we talk about the state of Wisconsin right sizing into a $300 million plus investment in Bitcoin. Now we're talking even broader at the federal or national level. Is this something that we could potentially do? Is this something that makes sense for us to hold? Because as the future digitizes us more and more quickly, finance, all of these international market, considerations, maybe it makes sense to have some Bitcoin as, again, a piece of the broader pie. Nick, I want to get your take on this too, because we've talked about this a little bit offline. You've been very on top of this topic. Just the fact that we're exploring it seems like a watershed moment versus 2 years ago when this was like an obvious no, if you were to ask anybody on the Hill. What do you think's changed, and what do you think it could mean for us?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of bills that are, out for review right now. I think it's something like 33 states as well, looking
Yeah.
at some bills either related to Bitcoin or strategic reserve. So there's a lot that's happening in just about every corner, and I don't know. I think that what it means and where it goes, still a lot to be ironed out in terms of some of the technical aspects. But what I think we will eventually see, or I guess potentially see, we're seeing at the nation state level, we're seeing at the state level. I think you're going to see it at the municipality level, and even maybe the city and local level.
Yep.
So it's a really interesting trend. Like I said, we couldn't have imagined that we'd be talking about this even a year or two ago. This is something that was posited as some sort of eventuality, I think decades into the future. So the fact that we're already talking about it is just a really uh, sort of mind blowing
Yeah.
aspect to to the crypto industry. But yeah, I don't. I think it's something that's going to permeate into many more aspects, both here stateside and in international markets as well.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, the corporates have been the leaders in this. You've seen MicroStrategy, which is now actually just rebranded to Strategy. don't know about that one. I don't know the PR firm, what they got paid for that one, but it's an interesting pivot. Long story short, we've seen a lot of corporates start to evaluate this as an option because they're sitting on a bunch of cash. Maybe they want to move it and rotate it. If you think about, the government being the biggest, entity that you can scale up to, I mean, it's the same kind of evaluation process, which I find kind of interesting. But yeah, for our listeners, it's really interesting because if we step back a year ago, or even when we started the show, it's like, okay, would we have anticipated that crypto had captured so much mind share throughout the halls of Congress, the Senate, the presidency, etc.? Probably not. I wouldn't have taken that bet, back then. So things are moving very quickly. I think it's also important to be a bit marshaled and saying like this isn't going to be something we roll out in the next 60 days. I'm happy to be wrong on that prediction, but it's also great to see people at least leaning in and seeking to understand before coming to a determination, because I think in the last couple of years we just seen more of a appetite for folks to say no or we're not ready, and now at least we're leaning in, and I think that's already a great improvement. So um, just to cap things off with a little bit of positive news as well. I mean, we sometimes tend to stay away or shy away from the stories of like FTX, for example, for folks who remember what happened there. Wasn't one of the best things to report on in crypto, but one of the positives is that the FTX estate, which is custodying all the funds for folks who use the platform and were affected by them going out of business, they're starting to repay those distributions out to those customers. So money is coming home to folks who are entitled to it. And I'm just very happy to say that we're putting a bow on all of this and that we can put it completely in our rearview mirror. I know, Nick, you'd mentioned to me a lot of our nonprofit folks have been wondering, like, how does this affect the broader perception of crypto? I mean, I'm very happy to just say, like, soon enough, this will all be settled and done with. And we can really turn the page on that chapter and really build for the future. But yeah, I thought that was a great way to end things because I know some folks were really waiting on that money to come back to them, and we can happily say that the saga has kind of ended.
Yeah, I mean, I guess taking a bit of a higher level view here, this all just kind of goes into the fact that nonprofits have completely been reevaluating their stance on this, just like folks have been reevaluating their stance on crypto. Individual investors, institutional investors, governments, municipalities, states, everybody taking a new view on this. And so, from what we're hearing from nonprofits in space, for lack of a better term, the phone has been somewhat ringing off the hook with nonprofits saying, okay, I'm getting off the sidelines in 2025. Crypto isn't going anywhere. We need to add this into our mix. We need to get younger. We need to diversify. Some nonprofits have been affected by this acute grant pause that's been going on. We talked about that on our last episode. So a lot of things just driving renewed interest, renewed enthusiasm. But for the most part, these elevated prices have just continued to spur overall generosity across the space. So the organizations that have started to embrace this have been seeing some great things. Like I said, to kind of wrap up this episode, check out that 2025 annual report. So a lot of great practical steps to take. And yeah, I mean, 2025 off to a really strong start, and we expect that this year could be pretty incredible for some of the reasons that we highlighted today, and for a lot of the reasons that we've highlighted in our annual report. So, with that, we'll have some new success stories to share on some upcoming episodes. But we can't wait to bring you some of the new guests that are in the docket. So, with that, on behalf of the whole team here at the Giving Block, thanks everybody, and we'll see you next week.